All right. Hello and welcome from San Antonio, Texas, home of the world's greatest salsa and also home of the Air Force basic training world and just a great place to live. I'm Matt Schaefer. I'm a retired Air Force public affairs guy. I am a big fan. Let me say this. I am a tremendous fan of the guy we're going to have as our speaker, Mark Schaefer. I have all his books. I hope that when you finish this, that you will buy at least one or two of those books and just put in the code Matt sent me. No, I'm just kidding. And I'm really excited to have Mark here because Mark has always helped me shape how the world of communications has changed. He's written a new book, which we will talk about. But Mark, I'm just going to give you that warm intro. Over to you, sir. And I will be waiting for questions from people in the audience. And if there's a point, we will ask. If not, Mark, at the last 10 minutes, we'll pick the best and we'll go from there. So over to you, sir. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, what I'd like to do is talk about a little bit of how my work has come together over the last 12 years or so. I had this realization that all these books and all this work that I've done sort of fit together. And I think the question that we all have as marketers or business leaders is this: how can we be heard? Essentially, that's what we're all trying to figure out right now. How can we be heard? How can we be seen? How can we be found? In fact, that's basically the topic of every marketing book written in the last 10 years, and probably the topic of every marketing book that's going to be written in the next 10 years. And so I'll tell you a little bit about how I got to where I am today. And this is the book that Matt was talking about. This is the new book, which he ordered probably 6 weeks ago and still doesn't have, curiously, but we'll fix that. So the first book I wrote was called Return on Influence. It was the first book on influence marketing, came out in 2012. And the reason I wrote this book is I saw this new vision of marketing that was opening up to us, that the power in organizations and companies and governments were shifting to the people because of the internet. There were no secrets anymore. And today, with a keyboard and a Wi-Fi connection, anyone can have a voice. Anyone can create influence and make their own dent in the world. And I saw this new power, both threatening businesses in some ways and creating a huge new marketing opportunity. Well, what I projected came true. In fact, so much content was soon being created, and we're all competing with this. One of my friends recently said, as businesses, we're competing with pictures of my grandchildren, right? So all this new content that's being created is all fighting for attention. In June of 2014, the lines crossed where more content is now being created by us than by media companies, and has continued to go up, 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 up. We are in the era of infinite media. Back in the day, when Matt and I were growing up in business, you had to have a lot of money to be able to broadcast anything. You needed a broadcast license, or you needed to own a newspaper. Today, the ability to create media is just unleashed, and it's infinite, and it's all competing with us. Now, so then I wrote a book called The Content Code, which is, look, if you're a business, what do you do to stand out? Then I wrote a book, the best-selling book on personal branding on the web, called Known. If you're an individual trying to create a personal brand, what do you do? I interviewed 97 people around the world who became known in their field, and they all did the same 4 things, no exceptions. So this book has helped a lot of people. My last book was called, that Matt mentioned, was Marketing Rebellion. I realized that this new power that consumers have, they are the marketers because of this power. Now, with this shift, how do businesses and organizations need to shift? What I'm seeing is marketing, most marketers are sort of like, they're in this trench. They're iterating. They want to do a little bit better on their SEO. They want to do a little bit better on their Facebook ads. But meanwhile, our customers, our constituents have taken a quantum leap away from us. They have an entirely new expectation of what they want from companies and from marketers. We've got the accumulated knowledge of the human race in the palm of our hands. I don't need you to manipulate me anymore. I want you to come alongside me at my point of need because I'm in control. You're not in control. I'm in control. Now, here we are in 2021. And I had this realization. I've been teaching at Rutgers University for, I think, 12 years now. I taught one of the very first social media marketing and content marketing classes at the university level anywhere. And I used to have this model. Here's how we create content to stand out today. It's RITE, relevant, interesting, timely, and entertaining. And if we use that filter consistently, I thought this is what will be attractive to people. Around 2015, in the content code era, I realized that's not enough. Content is not unusual anymore. Just by participating in the web and being RITE, that's not really enough. We also need to be superior in our niche. If we're not superior, then we're going to be abandoned because people will move to whatever insurance company, university, church, whatever, is creating something that appeals to me. So we've got to be RITES, rights. We have to be superior. Well, I had this realization that even that's not enough. Here we are in 2021. And maybe you feel as I do that even doing my best work, R is relevant. Relevant, interesting, timely, and entertaining is RITE. Relevant, interesting, timely, and entertaining. I'm looking at the question here that popped up.
Hey, Mark.
Yeah.
I'll bring in the questions. And
okay.
What does the R stand for, Mark?
Okay, good. So I'll just stay on a roll here.
You stay on a roll, and I'll interrupt you from time to time. Okay.
Yeah. All right. So then, look. I'm doing my best work. Here's an example. I was a contributor for many years to Harvard Business Review. It's really hard to get in Harvard Business Review. I would say that 1 out of every 3 articles I wrote was accepted to HBR. Then I got into this period about two years ago. They weren't accepting any of my articles. And finally, I went to the editor. I said, what's going on? She said, Mark, these articles that you're sending me are amazing. 5 years ago, 6 years ago, I would have taken them all. But now what's happening is that the competition is getting so great. Executives at companies realize that they can really stand out and help their personal brand and their company if they get an article in HBR. So they've got advertising agencies with scores of people and resources and money creating these articles for them. So even though I'm great, probably better than I was 5 years ago, I can't get into HBR. I'm being buried. So I'm not the kind of guy to say, oh, well, life is tough. We just need to move on. I get obsessed, and not in a healthy way. I get obsessed in a crazy way, trying to figure out these problems. What do we do? And so this new book I wrote called Cumulative Advantage. The subtitle is How to Build Momentum for Your Ideas, Business, and Life Against All Odds. And that is an important distinction because I think the odds are stacked against us. And I'm not, a victim. I don't play a victim. I don't have a victim mentality. I want to take ownership. I want to be accountable for what I do. But the fact of the matter is, I can't be accountable for somebody's algorithm that's blocking me out. I can't be accountable for, the these executives that are spending, $80,000 to get an article into Harvard Business Review. What am I going to do? And I think part of the answer is this idea of momentum. So that's what I wrote this book about, is how do we shift up to this next level, to be heard, to be seen, to be found. So I went down this rabbit hole, got obsessive, basically locked myself in the office for months trying to figure this out. And I started with this research that started in the 1960s. That's very, very well-known research by a very famous sociologist named Robert Merton. You've never heard of him because, let's be honest, how many of us can name any famous sociologist, right? But this guy was super famous, super famous. He came up with terms like self-fulfilling prophecy, unintended consequences. These are some of the things that came out of his research. Now, he has a very interesting story. He was an immigrant to America, and his family landed in the slums of South Philadelphia. He was very, very poor, and a tough life turned into disaster when his father's business burnt to the ground. Little Robert couldn't go to school anymore. He had to help his father make money. So what he would do is every night he would walk to the Carnegie Library. He would walk from the slums by himself. And he walked to the library. So often the librarians sort of adopted him. And he would walk past these big mansions and he'd think, how do these people get there? They're rich. They just keep getting richer. We just keep getting poorer. How do you move from here to here? Against all odds, he got a scholarship to Temple University. Against all odds, he got a scholarship to Harvard, got his PhD in sociology. Against all odds, he gets a teaching position at Columbia University. And while he's there, his students say, Professor Merton, it's not fair. We do all the work. And these tenured professors take all the credit for the work. They keep getting richer. We keep getting poor. It's not fair. Professor Merton said, I know. But how do I prove it? I think there's some dynamic going on here. So he and his researcher, a woman named Harriet Zimmerman, who later became his wife, did this research on Nobel Prize winners. And they found that if you have some initial advantage in your life, even if you're not the most talented, the most educated, the most whatever, if you have some initial advantage, sort of play your cards right, you create this unstoppable momentum, and the gap between you and your competitors widen. Now, it doesn't have to be money. It doesn't have to be education. Why is Bill Gates Bill Gates? Bill Gates, as a teenager, had access to some of the early computer prototypes. He was the only teenager in the country doing computer programming at the time. He was coding before anybody else. So that's how Bill Gates became Bill Gates. It wasn't because he was some spectacular student. He had this opportunity and he had this curiosity and he pursued it. Now, here is a very interesting idea that is the foundation of momentum and the foundation of the ideas that I have in my book. Behind every successful person and every successful company, there's probably a random event. That success begins with something unexpected. It could be, in Bill Gates' example, you're kind of in the right place at the right time. Maybe it's a conversation you have with someone. Maybe you're encouraged by someone. It could be a book that you read, a speaker that you heard, a random conversation with somebody at an airplane that sparks something that leads to where you are today. There was this research conducted by a guy named Franz Johansson that basically showed almost every business success starts with something random. Now, here's where I think this should provide a lot of hope that for anyone, building momentum doesn't require money in the bank. Building momentum doesn't require a PhD or an Ivy League education. I can point precisely to why I'm here with you today, to a random conversation that happened around 1992. I was stuck in my marketing job. My boss wasn't really going anywhere. And I said, what am I going to do? Where am I going to go? This thing called the World Wide Web was beginning. I said, you know what? I think there could be some business opportunities here. I went to my boss. I said, I would like to get an AOL account and put it on my expense account. I want to explore this idea of the internet. He thought this was a gigantic waste of money. We got into this big debate. Finally, he said, all right. It was like $9 a month. He said, whatever, go ahead. I had some ideas. The ideas worked. A couple years later, this Fortune 100 company wakes up and says, we need to have a global e-business department. Who's going to run this thing? Mark Schaefer, you've been on this World Wide Web longer than anybody else. You had some interesting ideas. You run it. I was sort of a pioneer in the e-commerce space. A few years later, I start my own business. I start consulting, start teaching, start blogging, leads to books, leads to speaking. This is how Matt Shearer learns about Mark Schaefer, right? And that's why I'm here with you today. We can all see that we're riding the crest of a wave that started long ago. Advantage leads to advantage. Now, there's another interesting thing about this. I didn't just have an idea, I pursued it, right? Just having an idea doesn't lead to momentum. You need to pursue your curiosity. And the timing for your idea has to be right. I call this the seam. Is there a fracture in the status quo? Is there a shift? Has something changed? What happened? The internet was beginning. My timing was right. I had this idea that fit through a seam. I burst through that seam with all my energy, with all my ideas, and it led to where I am today. So that's really the second idea I talk about in the book, is this idea of the seam. It's a new way to look at strategy in the digital age. Then comes awareness. If you're a marketing geek like I am, this is the most fun part of the book, because I talk about some new research, some new ideas about how ideas and services and people and businesses become known in the world. Step 4, I talk about the fastest way to get a shift is to get a helping hand from somebody who can help you. I challenge people to reimagine the idea of mentoring. In the old days, a mentor was a long relationship with someone who taught you something. Today, if you need to learn something, you just need to go to YouTube, generally speaking. You can learn almost anything there. A mentor today is someone that can open a new door, make an introduction, just take your momentum to the next level. It's the fastest way to get to that new level. Now, it's also the fastest way, the best way you can create momentum for others. And at the end of my book, I talk about how all of us have the ability to create these sparks of initiative, these sparks of momentum for others, and send ripples through history. Now, the last idea is once you create momentum, you've got to continue to sustain it. And that means making good decisions, surrounding yourself with the people, the resources, the processes to keep going. And most importantly, not panicking when something goes wrong. because something always goes wrong. And Jim Collins calls this the doom loop. You start to panic, you start to grasp at straws, and suddenly you've lost your way because you've changed your business so much, your customers don't even recognize it anymore. So what I'm trying to counsel people with, look, here we are in a pandemic. You've got to be aware of the changes. You've got to be aware of what's going on. Now, it's a sad time. We're losing a lot of businesses. But last March, I predicted we would have more business startups in America in the next 6 months than any time in our history. And that prediction came true. We've had a lot of business failures. We've had more startups than failures. Why? Because there's been a gigantic fracture in the status quo, right? What's great marketing? What's created? What leads to a great business? It's meeting unmet or underserved customer needs or creating new ones. Right now, we've had more unmet and underserved customer needs. It's a whole new world. And those are all new opportunities for businesses. So it's a time of opportunity. It's also a time not to panic. What I counsel when I do my coaching, I talk to people and I say, look, your goal right now, you've got a solid business, a solid concept. People love you. Your goal right now is to get through the next year. Whatever you need to do, land on the other side because you're going to be an awesome business again. So those are the foundational concepts of the book. I'd be happy to talk to you now and answer whatever questions you have. And we can talk about marketing rebellion. We can talk about personal branding. We can talk about momentum. Whatever I can do to make this a great conversation for you today, I'm here to help you out.
So we have a really good question from John. John, if you'll ask your question, John Knox. Great question.
Mark, so in the beginning of your book, first couple of chapters, you highlight some examples, Tim Ferriss, Merton, just a bunch of different people. And in every one of those examples, those individuals had some type of access to a great deal of books. Merton was going to a library. Tim Ferriss was, kind of stayed at home, and
right.
His parents gave him a whole lot of books. I read all that stuff, and like Don, I see Don Gleason on here. We're both very big active members of this executive book review, and we believe in this concept of lifelong learning. And I'm just wondering, as I look back on my life, I read like a lot of fiction stuff, but I didn't read anything businessy. And I wonder how different my life would be if maybe my parents had given me a bunch of books that, now I read today religiously, as you can see behind me. But do you think that has that focus on lifelong learning at an early age has an emphasis on, predicting success in somebody?
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, there's actually an academic reference in my book to exactly that. Yeah. So this idea of cumulative advantage, they've applied it to almost every career and field, to athletics, to academics, to entertainment, to business. And what they showed was that acquiring strong reading skills at an early age basically was a huge component of academic success and success in life. One of the statistics that I think is rather chilling to me, it showed, you correct me if I get the numbers a little wrong, but it's something like the children who grew up in poverty, who couldn't get enough to eat, couldn't get enough sleep, who were constantly living in fear, their average IQ was 77. And when they were adopted into a family where they felt safe and nurtured, their IQ jumped to 92. This was the greatest predictor of IQ increase, is just being raised in a safe, nurturing environment. So there are lots of little early life clues that can provide this initial advantage that lead to momentum in the long term.
Well, and I know we work with we work with an organization here in San Antonio called Robin's Nest. She's a philanthropic organization. They've got a big school bus that they've turned into a mobile classroom, painted it all blue. And that school bus drives down into the inner cities of San Antonio, and they teach not just the children, but also the families, which often don't know how to read, to read.
Wow.
Because we've discovered that, I don't know what the statistics are, but a large percentage of children that never learn how to read end up in jail.
Yeah. Well, I do a lot of mentoring with children in economically deprived areas. I've done this for 13 years, and one of the things I observed is that when the adults in this community, the children come home, and if the adults haven't had much education, they can't even help the children with the homework.
Right.
So it's like, wow. I mean, just think about, when my kids came home from school, I'll never remember this moment. It sort of helped define my initial advantage. My daughter was a little girl. She came home from school, and I helped her with her homework. She said, "Daddy, you explain things so well. I get confused in school, but whenever you explain it, I can understand everything. You should be a teacher." And what I realized is that I am a teacher. That is everything that I do, whether I write or I speak or I do a blog post. I'm a teacher. And if you think about how that created this advantage for my children, and that is a big gap. So Robin's Nest sounds like a wonderful, wonderful charity.
So
thank you for being involved in that.
We have a question from my colleague, Don Gleason. Don, you had a question.
Did, and I love John's question. And I was kind of thinking into that one because he talks about, is it an advantage? And I love the answer, and I think it definitely is. But then the question, and you may have kind of answered this one, but maybe we take a little bit deeper, is if you don't have access early on and didn't have the encouragement, how can we best help them?
Yeah.
Maybe I follow that on with a question I was just typing, which was, a hindrance to momentum is habits or the lack of habits, right?
Yeah, right.
If you don't take 15 or 30 minutes a day to read and focus, then and so many people these days are thinking they're too busy, right?
Yeah.
But in reality, we have so much junk in our lives, watching TV and everything else, that we don't focus on the right stuff. So how can we help people develop that habit, develop the momentum, so they move forward? Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, it's more than makes sense. It's something. This book, this was my 9th book. It was by far the hardest book for me to write, and here's why. What I realized, Don, as I was writing this book, is that every marketing book, every business book, every self-help book is elitist. It assumes you have the money to buy a book. It assumes you have the skills to read the book. It assumes you have the time to read the book. It assumes you have the resources to gather around you to activate what you learn in the book. And here's what I struggled with. I was tangled, thinking, why am I doing this? I'm writing a book that only appeals to really a certain segment of society. I had 2 audiences in mind as I wrote this book. One was my business audience, and the other is this underprivileged family that I've been working with for 13 years. And I kept thinking, is this applicable to both of them? And the answer is no. And it just tore my heart out. And so at the end of the book, there's a surprise. In chapter 10, the last chapter of the book, I talk from a very personal standpoint about this issue. That this research on cumulative advantage certainly has come true. And if you look at the gap between income, wealth, opportunity, personal savings between, let's say, white and black in America, it hasn't closed. the gap has not closed. Despite billions of dollars in government programs and billions of dollars in corporate efforts, it hasn't closed. And it hasn't closed in lots of different places in our society. But that's just an easy one that's intensely documented. And so here's the challenge at the end of the book to answer your question. We know that initial advantage that begins with momentum can come from lots of different places. It can come from these sparks. And I can tell you without any doubt, with true authority, that I have created momentum in people and people's lives that has changed the course of their lives. And this is something that is doable and accessible to everyone. You and I can't solve world hunger. You and I can't, I mean, it's just cosmically complex. The economic disparity in our country, it's cosmically complex. It's completely depressing. But here's the one thing we can do as an individual. We can create momentum in other people. And that sends a ripple through history. And I'll give you a simple example. I was on Clubhouse. I'm not a big, super huge fan of Clubhouse, but I've been playing around with it. Clubhouse, if you're not familiar, is an audio app that's hot right now. So I was in this Clubhouse, and if you want to talk, you raise your hand and you get invited to the stage. So this fella got invited on the stage, who's followed me on social media for some time. He said, "Mark, I just wanted to say thank you." He said, "You may not even remember this." He said, "But you were a guest lecturer at my university many years ago. You didn't know this. I was ready to drop out of school. I was an adult student. I'd gone back to school. I was depressed. I was disheartened. I didn't feel like I could keep up. I was kind of interested in marketing, but I was floundering. In the marketing class, you stayed after class and answered my questions. And you stayed and you stayed and you answered every question that I have. And at the end, you said, you are going to be great at marketing. I can tell by the way you're thinking and the questions you're answering that you are going to be great at this." He said, "Nobody ever gave me encouragement like that in my whole life. And for the first time, I thought, I can do this. I'm going to stick it out and see where it goes. I got my degree. I got a great job. And now I have a career. I've changed the narrative of my life. I'm supporting a family." And I actually remember that conversation with that guy. And I've continued to encourage him throughout his career. And who knows it would have that sort of impact. I certainly didn't know that at the time, but it just goes to show momentum starts with these random events. It could be encouragement. It could be reading to a child. It could be just lifting somebody up at the moment that they need it, right? And that's the way my wife and I kind of view our things. We can't, the way we apply our talents to the world. We can't solve world hunger, but how do we apply our talents and gifts to needs right now? Because it'll send a shockwave through the world in ways we can never imagine. And that's what we can all do right now.
So, Mark,
if I may, Matt, I love that because you just kind of brought that whole perspective of the book to life, and I really appreciate that because I typed in there the starfish idea, right? We can't save every starfish, but we can certainly make a difference to that one if we throw them back in the water.
Yeah.
We make such a difference with that one person if we help them, which is what John was saying with the bookmobile.
Yeah, absolutely.
so my question is this, Mark. How do you talk to your colleagues and your bosses about the momentum you need to make this happen? And how can you keep them focused on the idea of how simple things can really make a big impact to their bottom line or their organization?
Well, it really depends. It depends on the boss, I think. It's always a red flag to me when I hear the word convince. If I have to convince my boss, So, I mean, if you've got a culture in a company where your leaders are open and leaders want to progress and leaders want to move things forward and they want to stay relevant, then they should be open to new ideas. And I think, look, this new book, it's easy to read. It's fun to read. It's relatively short. Some people have told me they've read it in one sitting. In fact, the first person that read the book, it lives in Texas. And he said, Mark, he said, this is the first time I've ever read a book from cover to cover in one day. And then I stayed up all night thinking about it. So it's easy to read. It's fun to read. And, you know, I don't think when people read this book, I don't think they need to be convinced. I think it'll be obvious that, oh my gosh, I hadn't really thought about it this way. I mean, I can almost guarantee people that read this book will see the world in a new way. You'll start seeing this pattern of momentum over and over and over. And you'll think about it for your life, for your children's lives. You'll think about it in terms of startups. You'll think about it in terms of in established businesses. I had a friend who works for a pretty large company. And he said, I read your book and now I realize exactly where we're stuck. We've done number one, we've done number two, but we haven't really gone to the next step. That's where we are. That's what we need next. And so I think there is broad applicability for this book. And I think if you're an open learner, that you could read this book and it'll be obvious. You'll take something powerful away from it.
Anybody else have any questions? Chaplain Browning, you got a question? You're kind of new to this thought process.
Yeah, I was just typing one and
I'll just put the spotlight on you, sir. Go ahead.
yeah, let me see if I can send this. Well, I'll just read it. Mark, I thank you for your ideas. It's interesting to hear your concepts. I'm very interested in the book Known too. Just a little background, just so you know who I am. Grew up in West Texas, pastored a couple of churches, ended up going active duty for 28 and a half years. Had a great career, ended up as a senior chaplain at Joint Base San Antonio, which is how I met Matt. Now I'm working with, in fact, I'm the director of an organization called Mark Center for Chaplain Studies, and our goal is to help create a collaborative synergy among institutions, associations, and seminaries in how we train chaplains of all types, and also to increase the support and the advocacy of chaplains. We're currently working with we call it a round table. It's part of our interfaith think tank objective, and we're looking at inmate reentry or integration, those who are coming out of a correctional facility, be a juvenile to adult, moving back into society in the enormous difficulties. And one of the neat things is being able to look at these, what I call, so often we're twisted stovepipes. We give the impression we're working together, but too often in the helping agencies in the military, we're simply kind of giving our slice of the pie. And when you can break down those barriers and truly look at a situation from a multifaceted perspective, you'll find creative pieces and parts that suddenly make what was a very difficult issue become suddenly an aha moment and solvable. But as I listen to you, I'm wondering, is there a common denominator of helping create momentum across your many examples? Is that common denominator ultimately relational? I heard you walk through the element of building momentum, of having an advantage in idea, pursuit, awareness, and sustainment. At each of those elements, what factor of having someone that, use your story a while ago, that encourager, where you took time and energy to say to someone, I believe in you. I think you have what it takes. That was that for him was an aha moment.
Right.
But would you say so much of, is there a common denominator in all of this that requires a relational aspect to keep that momentum going forward?
You know, it's a good question. So is part of this. I went down some really weird rabbit holes to answer some of those questions for my book. And I talked to a principal of a school. She's been a teacher and a principal of a school in impoverished neighborhoods for, I think, 30 years. And she's seen every bad, horrible thing. And I said, what gives you hope? And she said, I do have hope. I see hope. She said, the future is in our children. And here's what turns lives around. And this sort of gets to what I think maybe where your instinct is. She said, lives get turned around when they have someone who believes in them and they tell them that they're worthy. And then there's a support structure around them to make them believe it over time. She said, that's what changes lives. And I heard that over and over again. There's a book called Teaching in Poverty that documents the incredible problems that teachers face when they're teaching in impoverished neighborhoods. And the same thing came out. I talked to a woman who's a community activist in St. Louis, fighting to get resources for her school district. She lives in this impoverished area. And if you can believe this, the school funding comes from property taxes. She said, we're never going to get ahead. We're never going to have adequate resources for our children because, you know, we live in the slums and we only get funding from the property taxes. So she said the same thing. She said, we've got to have the resources to support this. You know, we have to give the confidence to the children and we have to support them over time. It just can't be a pat on the head. So that's maybe that you see that same sort of theme, that there is involvement, there is engagement. You know, I know I've had a huge impact on children in our community, but I've been involved with them for 13 years. I hang out with them. You know, we go through struggles together, and it's not lending a hand, it's being the hand. It's showing up. One of my favorite quotes from the Marketing Rebellion book is an organization today can't be in a community. It has to be of the community. I think that relates to cumulative advantage too. Being in a community is given a donation. Being of a community is rolling up your sleeves and saying, you know, I care for you. One of my favorite case study of the year is from Houston during the power outage and the ice storm. There was that furniture company, Mattress Mac, right in Houston. He didn't lose power. And he went out to the community and said, if you're cold, come into my store. We're warm. And he brought in food. He created a play area for the children. And he had 500 people a night sleeping on the mattresses in his store, because that's what you do if you're a friend. If your friends are cold, you invite them in. If your friends are hungry, you invite them in. And I want to tell you that it's an example of this fracture in the status quo, right? Power outages, people freezing. It's a tragedy, but every fracture in the status quo is also an opportunity. Mattress Mac has become a legend. No one in Houston will ever buy furniture from anybody other than Mattress Mac, because they'll never forget him. They'll never stop talking about him. And that's because he rolled up his sleeves and said, business today is being of the community, not giving, you know, not having my name on a shirt in a little league someplace, but rolling up our sleeves and saying, how do we apply our skills, our resources to help people right now at their moment of need? You know what? That's marketing. It might be Christian philosophy. It's marketing. Christian philosophy is marketing today.
Well, not too long ago, we've had our 8-year-old grandson for a couple of weeks at a time, and he was struggling in school, the Zoom school. He's in a pretty prestigious school in College Station. But it was interesting. One night I was sitting with him as he was struggling really with a lack of confidence, struggling reading, just struggling. And I said to him, Silas, I believe in you. And it was interesting in that second, it was like something clicked. And then, it was just, it was remarkable. And now his reading has improved. Now we've spent many a night reading books before bedtime and that kind of thing. But it's been very interesting that you talked about that spark that everybody needs. And I think for him and our relationship, it may have been that moment.
Yeah.
So I appreciate your insight.
That might be something he always remembers.
Well,
We have one more question. We have another question from Nadine, and Nadine says, what are the top trends that you see in superior communications?
Well, that's a big question.
It's a big question. That's an hour-long answer. But
Yeah. So let me just try to think of a few things. All right. Number one is the subtitle of the Marketing Rebellion book is The Most Human Company Wins. Also, the most human church. Also, the most human university. Also, the most human nonprofit. Fill in the blank, right? Because this is what people crave today. Especially now during the pandemic, we're isolated, we're afraid, we're cut off. And the research shows the more time people spend on the internet, the more depressed and alone and fearful they feel. They are. And this was research before the pandemic. So look at every communication you do and think about, how can we make this more human? How can we add a human story, compassion, even vulnerability? How do we add our face, our smile? How do we let people hear the excitement in our voices? Look at every phone call, every meeting, every text message, every customer complaint. Take off the stock photos on your website. Use real people. Put pictures of yourself, of your employees, of your customers. Put a video on there of you, 3 minutes or less, saying, my name is Nadine. Let me tell you why I do what I do. Let me tell you how I started and why I will never let you down, because this is my heart. This is my life. And I want to help you. I don't even know what your business is, but that's what people want to hear. So that is really very key. Another important thing right now, which I talk about extensively in the content code, is that something that really people overlook is the idea that the economic value of content is zero unless people see it and share it. So we're creating great content and we're building our audience, but if our content doesn't ignite, then we're really sub-optimizing our effort. And creating content takes a lot of time, costs a lot of money. So it's like building a factory and then having it sit there empty. We've got to have the content ignite. So we need to think about every time we create some content, how do we unleash that content? How do we place that content where it can be seen and shared? And a lot of people today still have this mindset that everything has to be on our website. We need to drag people to our website. Just get that content out there every way you can. Here's, something that is going to seem really counterintuitive. A lot of people on websites, they've got gated content. What I mean by that is here's a special thing we made for you. If you give us your email, you can have it. Guess what? 95% of the people will not give you your email. And you have just lost the opportunity to ignite that content for 95% of the people that are interested in it. And you know what? If they really love that content, they're going to call you up. They're going to see what's next. And you're missing the opportunity on 95% of the people. Now, a lot of people say, oh my gosh, we spent so much money creating this content. We've got to have their email address. Well, you know, you've got a choice to make. The value comes from igniting the content. And wouldn't you rather, if you ignite the content, you never know what's going to happen. Maybe one of those people share it with somebody else that creates a customer. Maybe they share it with their boss and you've got a new business partner. You never know. But here's the one thing I'll know: that will never, ever happen if they don't see the content. So take away every barrier and get that content to move. So those are a couple high-level ideas.
Mark, thank you so much. We have 5 minutes left. I've really, really enjoyed this. I'm taping this. I'm going to record this. I will share this. I'll put this on my YouTube channel for people that need to hear this, because this was a great message. Don't you all agree, folks? I'm seeing some people that haven't contributed. I'm looking at you, Dan Sommer. I'm looking at you, Bruce Cohart. I'm looking at you, Anthony. You know, I know we're going to work together on some stuff on your profile, and we're just scratching the surface on your capabilities. Chaplain Browning, before you go, hope you'll hang around. I want to introduce you to a friend of mine, Jim Comer. He's also here. But thank you so much. You know, it's momentum.
Yeah, thanks everyone. And Matt has been he was a fan of my books. He's turned into a friend, and I can't wait to come down to San Antonio again. And I'm actually working with a company in San Antonio, Kielbasa. Kielbasa, they make sausages, and they are an amazing family-owned business. They came to me and they said, we want to be the most human company in our space. And so now they're using the Marketing Rebellion as the entire format. All the way at the top, Michael Kielbasa, the president of the company, is in these meetings saying, help us, help us. Yeah. And during the pandemic, they're donating 10,000 pounds of meat a month to his community because they're taking my advice, right? They're showing up. They're not in the community. They're of the community.
I love that.
Yeah. So Kielbasa, great company to watch. And I'm going to come down there, hopefully, maybe even this summer, because, I've been working with Kielbasa for over a year. I've never met these people.
Yeah.
So hopefully I'll be down there soon.
And, I can say this as somebody that's active in my community. We're very familiar with Kielbasa, especially with high school football. They do a lot of work in that area. They donate a lot of their products to high school booster organizations. You see them all over the place. They're definitely one of those names that was easy to recognize because of their community contribution. Mark, as always.
Thanks, everyone.
It's a pleasure to have you.
Stay safe. Hopefully I'll see you down in Texas soon. Take care.
All right. Thanks. Bye-bye, sir. Jim, meet Jim. Bye, Tina.
Very nice to meet you all.
Anthony, thanks for showing up. Hope that was helpful to you, sir. And I'll be in touch soon about our email and our work, okay?
Very good. Jim. Hi, Jim. My name is Jim Browning. It's nice to meet you. You're muted, so I can't hear you. There you are.
I'm so sorry. I've only been doing this for a year. You'd think I could unmute, right?
I think we've all become amateurs with Zoom, kicking and screaming, but it certainly has become a way of.
It has for me too. Great. I'm so glad we got a chance to connect here. I have some dear friends who are or have been chaplains, so I know a good bit about that work, and I respect it so much.
Well, thank you. It's now that I've been involved. Gerald Marsh was a seminary professor in Fort Worth, Texas, and at that time, Southwestern was the largest seminary in the world. He probably touched more men and women for chaplaincy of all types.
Right.
So that's we named the center after him. He's 90, probably 3 or 4
Oh
now,
my.
but just phenomenal. But you know, I knew military very well, and hospital a little bit, but my gosh, I've been learning so much about chaplaincy across the board. It's been a great opportunity. So
Yeah, I have 2 friends who are hospice chaplains or have been, and another one who worked in hospitals.
yeah.
So
These hospital folks are my heroes right now. I tell you, I think we ought to take a day nationally and say thank you to all of our hospital industry. From
I think so too. They've done amazing
yeah.
things.
They have.
And at great risk to themselves.
Yes, yes. Well, tell me a little bit about you. I know a little bit about Matt, but Jim, what do you do, and how are you connected with Matt?
Well, Matt and I were in a mastermind group last year, a group of about 8 or 9 people, and we got to be friends, having never met physically I don't think we met for almost a year. And he heard me talking about one of my 2 areas. I am a speech coach and speech writer, and you know, it's funny. I was so thrilled to hear Mark talk about being real and vulnerable and individual and telling stories, because that is what I preach to my speech writing and speech coaching clients. Because if they'll do that, they'll stand out. And so in that area, that's what I try to do. I get them to write the way they really talk. So we write it together so it doesn't sound like some, you know, automaton, but a real person in their real language with no acronyms and buzzwords. And then when I try to get them to deliver it the way they really speak to their friends and family when they're excited about something.
Awesome.
And so that's a big, and I am a speaker. I speak on that subject. And then I also speak on caregiving, because in 1996, my mother had early dementia, and my parents were living in Dallas. And then my dad, who was her caregiver, had a stroke, a major one. And I was the only child living in LA, and they were in Dallas, where we had no relatives. So instantly, in a second, my life turned upside down, and I ended up quitting my job, moving back to Texas, where I hadn't been in 30 years, and being a caregiver for 14 years. And then I wrote a book about it called When Roles Reverse, which did pretty well. And I spoke on that. I did a keynote speech on that. And so Matt and I got to talking about that last year, and we've just done some videos based on my ideas. We've got 7 videos of about 6 minutes each, and we're about to try to get me out there to see if I can do some speaking, maybe via Zoom as well as in person, on caregiving.
Awesome. What a huge need.
It's a giant need. And last summer, you know, and I was thinking I would never, I certainly didn't think I'd be doing any speeches. I had 2 old clients where I'd gone in person and done my keynote. They reached out to me out of no place, 2 of them within 1 week, one in Baton Rouge and one in upstate New York, wanting my old caregiving speech because their people could no longer get in to see their parents. So I did 2 hour-long speeches on Zoom, and they worked. So I was shocked to hear that. And that was I think Matt heard that, and then he wanted to see my book and stuff, and we got to going on this caregiving.
I tell you, a connection that you ought to make is with Marketplace Chaplains out of Plano, Texas.
Let me write that down.
Marketplace Chaplains.
Okay.
Contact, let me do a quick search here. Contact CG Macklin.
Say it one more time.
C as in Charlie, G as in Golf.
Okay.
Macklin, MACLIN.
LIN.
At marketplacecare.com.
What is that organization about? Tell me a little about it.
They are a company that provides chaplains to industry.
Wow.
From nursing homes to all the way to Fortune 500. CG is in charge of their training, and what clicked with me and telling that I recommended you.
Okay.
We're using for a webinar we did a webinar called Lessons Learned in Using Technology and Innovation in Delivering Spiritual Care During COVID-19. A little long of a title, but and we had a multitude from VA to hospital to military to corporate chaplaincy to parachurch and correctional presenters. And CG was one of those presenters. But what made that connection for me just now is they provide chaplains for nursing homes and that sort of thing. And I think some of your insights might be a worthy topic that they may be interested in, of helping their chaplains to then help the children of parents. And because when the child becomes a parent to the parent, that is a very difficult transition. It
is. And you know, it's so funny. I was telling somebody, gosh, yesterday, I walk with a friend and we were talking about things, and we were talking about, I've done several books, and I said, you know, if I had to put that entire book, which took me a couple of years, 300 pages, if I could put it into one sentence, it would be, if Jim Comer, the most selfish and not caregiving person in the country, could learn to be a caregiver and do it for 14 years, so can you. If they take that away from my book, if they go, if he can do it, God knows I can do it. Wow. If they get that from it, and you know, and then I think the other thing is what Mark just talked about, showing up. Yeah. You don't have to be perfect as an adult caregiver. You just have to show up. Yeah. And you're going to learn on the job, as I did.
I adopted a man I met well, it was in 91. I had just buried my father. I met him a week later at my second base. He just turned 98.
Oh, wow.
And I call him Dad. We talk at least once a day.
My goodness. Isn't that great?
He is one of my mentors of you know, I think we need mentors in our lives in different areas. And he's my mentor of how to manage aging life issues.
Wow. Great. Isn't it great that it's great that you have each other, isn't it?
He calls me son and I call him Dad. He has 2 daughters, and
oh wow,
they are not threatened by it. And we if he has a VA appointment, I take him to it.
Isn't it? Now, do you live in San Antonio, right?
I'm southeast of San Antonio. I chose to get outside of Bexar County. And so I'm down toward Floresville in the southeast part, if you will.
Okay.
I'm 7 miles outside of Loop 1604.
Sure.
In the peanut capital of Texas.
In the what?
The peanut capital of Texas.
That's it. That's it.
Right. I actually spoke in Floresville. I gave that caregiving talk in Floresville, gosh, 10 years ago, probably 10 or 12 years ago.
Well, it's a very, very important subject, because I tell you, those with Alzheimer's, Parkinson, that is a tough disease to go through.
It is, and it's tough on the children, because I would think the other thing from my talk that people told me was the most important was I showed how I screwed up. I talk a lot in my talk about, I give examples of how I did it wrong and how I learned to do it right. And you know, when I first moved back, within the first month, my mother, who was like, gosh, in her mid-80s, and I was just learning how to deal with Alzheimer's, and she said she wanted to visit her sister in Smithville, who'd been, of course, dead for 8 years. And I, being new, did not realize that I should have kind of gone along with that. So I told her, we can't go see Estelle. She's in heaven. And my mother started crying and carrying on for 20 minutes as if she'd never heard it before. And all of a sudden, and I went to an Alzheimer's expert the next day and said, what did I do wrong? And then she gave me this great one-liner piece of advice. She said, quit trying to drag your mother into your world. She can't go there anymore. You have got to go into her world.
Yeah. And
I tell you, I got it. I got it the first time she said it. And for the next 14 years,
wow,
I went into her world. And it kept changing, and it kept changing and getting, you know, and her world got narrow and narrow, and I just kept changing with it. And I got to tell you, more people have told me that one example helps them.
I had heard that, not too long ago. And I thought, what a critical insight.
Oh, it's just
Just join them where they are.
got to, because if you try to make them wrong for where they are or try to correct them, that's the opposite of what they need.
Mm-hmm.
Because they can't do that. I mean, we don't tell somebody who's got cancer, stop having the cancer.
Yeah.
You know, you wouldn't do that. So why would you tell somebody with dementia, remember? Don't you remember? No.
Are you here in San Antonio or up and down?
I'm in Austin.
Okay.
Because we moved down. I got them to Austin right away because this is where I have relatives. And I had a lot more 25 years ago when I came here, but this is where I had a base of support where we didn't have any relatives in Dallas, and I needed all the support I could get.
Absolutely.
And I love Austin, so that turned out well.
Good. Very good.
So yeah, Austin has been a good fit for me. So, well, I hope I get to meet you sometime, other than on Zoom.
Well, and I'm grateful for Zoom because, my goodness, we when we do our advisory team meetings, we got people from West Coast, East Coast.
Right. No, it's true. That's one of the great advantages of Zoom.
Well, I thought Mark raised some interesting perspectives, Matt, when he talked about find the scene that's in the pandemic is a huge gap.
That's what we've, with our military transition roundtable, that's the scene that we're like, really, because that's a real issue with a lot of these people transitioning. They're not giving quality instruction. So, yeah.
Well, one thing is we're learning from marketplace chaplains, and they were telling me that about, I think he either said 12% or 20% of the businesses that they provide chaplains for are not going back to the brick and mortar building. They're staying in the telecommuting world. And so they're
what percentage was that?
It was, I think he said 12%, either 12 or more.
That doesn't surprise me at all.
Yeah, and so they're trying to figure out, well, how do you provide chaplain coverage? We used to go to the building or the factory or whatever and walk around. Now it's how do you provide chaplain coverage to a dispersed population, which has implications to the military. The military, I'm hearing, is a percentage of their workforce will not return back to work. They'll work from home.
I think that's going to be true pretty much across the board. We just don't know what the percentages are going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And how long that will.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
I'd say, but the concern I have is there'll be some positive benefits, but there's going to be some negative ramifications, I think, in the relational piece. I heard a university chaplain, it was a webinar about a week ago. He is Hindu of all things, and he's someplace out in California, and he was talking about, he's been there a number of years. In this last generation coming on, he said, are more, they're having more issues because they're coming into the university with a great higher level of anxiety and a sense of isolation.
Good.
They're seeing the rate of suicides and that sort of thing much higher than the others. And I think it'll be interesting to see what's the negative piece of what the pandemic and the isolation has caused. But
well, for one thing, for a chaplain, how do you hold someone's hand over Zoom?
Yeah, it's very.
How do you give them a hug? How do you look directly? There's that stuff that goes beyond words.
Yeah, it's the power of the human touch.
Absolutely, you can't beat it.
Yeah.
So, well, I love the work you do. I know how powerful it is.
Well, thank you. I appreciate guys like you. They help us to figure things out.
Well, still trying to figure out things. One of the things that was very helpful to me today when Mark was talking, he talked about, we can't solve hunger. We can't, all these giant, I look at homelessness and I would give anything if I could find a way to change that. But, and I realized, because I'm in a 12-step program for a long time, and I realized that my work with sponsees and I've got 5 of them right now, and that's a lot, and they're all active. So my work with them is my bit. I can't change I can't change alcoholism and addiction, but I can work with 5 guys. And that makes a difference. And that's what I can do. And I felt that's what he was saying, really.
Yeah.
And, you know, if we all find whatever it is we can do that nobody else can do, and we can do it with individuals and make a change, that's so powerful. And sometimes I forget that. So it was nice to hear him say it.
It was.
And we all can do that.
You're familiar with the starfish illustration?
Oh, yeah, of course. Yeah.
You know, and I think it's a good reminder. I can't change all of them, but if I can touch one.
That's exactly it. And then hopefully they touch somebody else.
Yeah. Hopefully.
That's the whole magic of it, you know?
Yeah, indeed. Well, Matt, I appreciate you. Thank you for inviting me in. Jim, very nice to meet you.
Yeah, I hope in the flesh eventually someday.
I hope I put the 2 of you guys together some more.
That'd be great.
If Mark Schaefer comes down, you'll have to let us know, and maybe we can grab dinner somewhere.
Oh, that'd be great. I'd love that.
There's a lot of good Mexican food restaurants down this way.
I'll bet there are, and I can always eat Mexican food. I went to a college in San Antonio.
Where?
I went to Trinity.
Okay. Very good. Well, Jim, very nice to meet you.
Great to meet you.
Thank you again for putting this on. There's some creative juices trying to ferment here. And as we tried to figure out an effective way of marketing the Marsh Center, the Marsh Center is, and I think one of our key is we want to create chaplaincy curriculum and give it away.
You know, I want to work with you on that. I know there's ways to, you know, there's also the business side of this a little bit, but, you know, I would really want to help you with on the LinkedIn side, and Jim here is a resource. You know, there's a lot of resources. I'm not all over the place, but I know what I do well. And when I can't reach that person, I know the person that can do that. In many cases, Jim is that guy. I have a lot of other resources. And Jimmy, because I would help you understand there's Jim and Jimmy. Jimmy, I will follow up with a conversation in a couple of days. Let's see what our next step is. Maybe doing a short roundtable on LinkedIn, you know, what the LinkedIn basics are, and go from there.
Yeah, I need to get to that information you sent me. We have what we call advisory team. I don't call them a board, because the board to me is a management style, whereas an advisory team, it is 39 people right now that come largely out of chaplaincy in one shape or another. I mean, I've got a guy out in California who did juvenile chaplaincy for 50 years. And when he first said that, I thought, 50 years, but he said
that's my fun, Jim.
And so we have a wealth of people from all different venues, different types of chaplaincy that come together. And it was interesting. One of our retired federal chaplains in one of our meetings said, you know, I have a real concern about the reentry recidivism issues. And immediately one of our corporate chaplains who works as a senior chaplain for Tyson Food, it's the big chicken outfit, she said, you know, I think that's something that we could get involved with and help with. Well, we're part of the Marketplace Chaplains. They have chaplains for companies who love to hire inmates. Well, suddenly you begin to see the creative movement. And so we had our second, I call it a round table. It's a round table with empty chairs, and anyone is invited to come and be a part of the discussion. So we had the second discussion, and we're still in the early stages of trying to understand the issue, because until you define the issue, I don't think you can brainstorm potential solutions. But my sense is that it's going to be, how do you help family, society, and churches, or the faith community, come together in a way that is supportive of that whole effort. And what I learned, Matt, in the military, it's with deployments, and my doctoral work was dealing with separation issues, is you don't wait till a person's coming home to deal with reintegration from a deployment. You start before they go in.
Yep.
You start before, during, because the hardest time of the deployer, military deployer, is the one when they come home. Not when they're getting ready to leave, not when they're gone, but when they're trying to reintegrate. And so we started before they left, tried to work with families in the military while they were gone. And what we found is then the transition back into their family and community was much easier if you had that continuum process. So I think that's one of the insights the military can bring into the correctional community. So that's part of the joy of being in the Marsh Center, is the collaborative energy and synergy that hopefully we can create. And this is just one issue, but I think that's it's the one that and right now, Matt, right, it seems like we're growing exponentially, just organically. It's word of mouth, and it's these connections that we're making that, hey, you need to go talk to so-and-so. And so I have a lot of Zoom meetings each week. I've got 3 or 4 already scheduled this week. And so it's, but it's a joy. So yeah.
Jim, it sounds like that work, I have never understood why the prisons don't equip people when they get out so they don't come back. I don't get it. Why don't they invest in that?
Well, there are a lot of different investments that they make. Angola prison in Louisiana was the world's worst, or the nation's worst, based on Newsweek. And the warden had an idea, and he brought seminary training into the prison to train inmates to be ministers, if you wish, to the inmates.
Wow.
Recidivism rate dropped from 80% to 20%.
Whoa.
Isn't that amazing?
Did that just happen recently?
No, it's been, in fact, so now there's about, and I won't get these statistics right, but there's either 12 states now that have this program in it, or there's 18 and 12 more on the docket, or vice versa.
Well, that's great news. But the world doesn't know that. I've never heard that. If you had asked me about Angola, I would have said that's the worst prison in the world.
Yeah, and same here. I'm learning more about prison ministry and those coming out.
Wow, that's fantastic. Well, and the other one that's so terrible is the one in Mississippi, Parchment.
Okay, I'm not.
That's the big one in Mississippi. It's infamous. Wow, that's good news.
But there are some amazing, and that was my comment. I said, you guys are unsung heroes. Some of what you're doing collectively, it's not just the chaplains, it's industry, it's state.
Yeah.
And I said, nobody knows this.
That story should be on 60 Minutes or something like that.
I agree.
That would be a great story.
So that's my challenge, and I appreciate Matt, is how can we get some of these wonderful human interest stories out?
Yeah. Well, I love that. I'm so glad to hear that.
So Jimmy, stand by for more about that, okay?
Okay. Well, what I'll do, Matt, is next time we'll have probably early May, the next meeting with this roundtable. I'll shoot you. In fact, I'll shoot you, and you can send it with Jim, the minutes and the video of this last meeting. I just sent it out today. And that way, if you guys are interested in what we're doing there, hang on just a minute. And Jim, I'll get your email and I'll send you the same thing.
And Jim, I want to get your address because I'm going to send you a copy of my book. I think you might. I'll send it to you. I think you might enjoy it, or you may know somebody that can use it. Who knows?
All right. Let's see. Give me a half a second here and I will. Well, I won't. Here we go.
Hey, Jim.
Yes,
Yeah.
Let me do this. You guys need to learn how to connect with Jim Comer on LinkedIn. You're both first degrees of mine.
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn too, Jim. So
Yeah, good.
Jimmy?
yes, sir.
Reach
Did
out
you
to-
notice how Matt tied in that LinkedIn need? That
Oh
was,
yeah, he always does that. He's good at that.
No, I'm trying. It's a tool, okay?
yeah, you're right.
Not going to stub your finger on it, okay?
It's so funny, Jim, when he calls you Jimmy, my ears perk up because that was what they called me all the way through college. And I went like that.
Well,
I dropped
that's
it.
my birth name. I was
Yeah,
named
yeah.
After 2 uncles, and so So people keep wanting to make me a James. I said, no, I'm really a Jimmy.
I love it.
Anyway, very
Hey,
good.
West-
Well, Matt, I'll
West
send
Texas
this to you.
Jimmy, West Texas Jimmy, you want to get my that look for me? Call me Matthew. Ooh. Only the
Go ahead and give me your email, and I'll send this.
Me? You talking to me, Jim?
Yes.
Okay, it's Jim Comer, JIMCOMER at me.com. Me.com.
Okay.
So Jim Comer at me.com.
I will send you what I was just talking about in the meeting we had, and that way you can see it. And
Great.
it will give you a link to the Google recording, and that way you've got. And I'll send you an email that has my address and all.
Oh,
that.
terrific! Thank you so much.
All right. Well, God bless you.
Really enjoyed talking to you. Thanks so much.
Nice to talk to you.
Talk to you soon, Matt.
West Texas Jimmy, Austin Jimmy. Guys, nice to put you two together.
I used to call him JB in school because there was another Jimmy in the class, so I got to be known as JB.
Oh, I got it.
Have a good one, guys.
Bye-bye.
All right, Matt. Thanks for the introduction and a chance to hear today's presentation about Mark. So it was good.
I'm glad you saw that, Chaplain. I'm really, if there's a way that we can work professionally as well, I'm all about that. I know there's resources out there to help grow our chaplain force. I always think of the military, but I forget about the other versions of chaplaincy. Yeah, been impacted by it a couple times.
Good. Well, you are definitely my docket to both to get through your materials and then engage you. I've just the last 2 or 3 weeks I've been slammed. I've got one of those colonoscopies this week, so that's going to slam me this week.
Where are you going for that?
Just here local, here in Florida.
Yeah, those are so much fun.
No. So preparation starts tonight.
Thank you. So listen, let's talk in a few days, okay?
Well, let me get past this week.
Next week's fine. Today, you want to talk about meetings? It's like meeting. I had my first meeting was 7 o'clock with my friend in Czechoslovakia.
Wow.
It's like, now I get to take a break. Now I get to get cleaned up. It's like, I woke up late because guess what? It's that spring ahead day that it catches you all the time.
Yeah. Well, I rolled out of bed at 5:45 this morning, and I started about 2 years ago, started doing about 20 minutes of yoga every morning.
Good for you.
And it has helped my knees. It has helped I've always been very tight, my tendons, my hamstrings, and that sort of thing. And so that has been a big help.
I'm probably going to need to do more of that. So thank you for that inspiration.
Well, I had a geriatrics doctor tell me as we were running together 2 assignments ago, she said those who work yoga as they get older don't fall as often. And I thought it's balance, it's muscle strengthening, and I can tell, not being in the gym 3 times a week, my body has changed. But my daughter, who's a massage therapist, said, "Dad, you're actually better physical condition now than I was back when I was in the gym 3," which I don't know if I am convinced of that, but that's what she tells me.
I can see that.
So, but I'm much more limber than what I used to be. But
Well, you've given me some inspiration there, Chaplain.
you bet, Matt. Thank you again for your willingness, and I will connect with you. We're big time. We're in a writing of a primer. It's 297 pages. We're 54% written, and we've got 97% of it committed with about 26 different authors that we're working with. So
Wow.
it's been and I'm trying to manage all those bits and pieces, and it's been fun and challenging, but I've been blessed. So anyway.
All right, sir.
God bless you. Thank you again. Great to see you.
Thank you. God bless.